Hi, Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday morning, July the 3rd. Still dealing with a major hurricane, Beryl. It's a Category 4 storm right now. Will pound away at Jamaica later today into tonight, and it looks like it'll arrive to a position over the Yucatan Peninsula region of Mexico by Friday, and then spill out over into the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. I continue to believe that the track that has been very consistent on a west-northwest basis will likely turn to the northwest over the upcoming weekend and possibly bring whatever remains of Hurricane Beryl towards or even into the southeastern part of Texas. We've talked about the reasoning behind that opinion of mine that there could be a late in the game northwest turn, specifically related to the upper level pressure pattern and how high pressure will shift from the interior part of the country to the east coast, western Atlantic over the next few days, and that should open the door for a turn more to the north and west as compared to the west-northwest of recent days. Let's start off here today by looking at the latest sea surface temperature anomaly map. First of all, here is the west coast of South America right here, and you can see all this blue out here. This is the development, intensification of La Nina. We've talked about this over the past several months, that the earlier in the year El Nino conditions of warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean will gradually flip to La Nina by the bulk of the hurricane season. And here we are into the hurricane season right now, into the month of July, and indeed we have colder than normal sea surface temperatures right now out across the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean, the equator roughly right in this region right here, and this is an intensifying La Nina. Now, also of interest, what's going on in the just off the west coast of Africa, we continue, this is Africa, west coast right here, continue to see some cooler than normal conditions at the sea surface area in the eastern Atlantic. That is something we'll continue to monitor, and if that maintains itself or even intensifies, that will become an inhibiting factor to those African waves that come off the west coast of Africa and then out over into the eastern part of the Atlantic. Something we'll monitor over the next several weeks. Notice also a little bit cooler than normal conditions here showing up in parts of the western Gulf of Mexico. Now, the Caribbean Sea right here, and of course Beryl has cut across the Caribbean Sea, remains largely above normal. We'll see in a few days if there's a change to some cooler conditions at the surface level here due to upwelling. Upwelling is when a major hurricane passes over water. It can cause upwelling, which basically churns the water so that colder water from underneath rises up to the surface. And that indeed should take place here and show up here on these maps over the next couple of days. And that is one of the reasons why a trailing system just behind Beryl, which looks like it'll take the same path out across the Caribbean Sea, is likely to have far less favorable conditions for development, partly as a result of what I expect we'll see cooler sea surface temperatures. So again, this area will be of interest over the immediate term, over the next few days, to see if indeed upwelling causes a bit of cooling in the Caribbean Sea. Well, before we take a look at the current positioning of the tropical systems in the Atlantic Basin, I want to go back to this particular map that I featured in our tropical outlook. And you can find that at arcfieldweather.com. Go to the upper right under seasonal outlooks, and then the 2024 tropical outlook. This is a collection of La Nina tropical seasons with respect to the tropical cyclone track density. And certainly there was a strong signal here, and we emphasized that across the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. And this certainly is starting off that way for the 2024 tropical season. We've had Alberto went in this general area. Now Beryl and a follow-up system will also push right into the Caribbean Sea. So again, this is not atypical for a La Nina type of tropical season, in that the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico are generally hit harder than other parts of the Atlantic basin. So we'll see if this continues in this type of trend over the next few months. Now here's the latest official positioning by NOAA's National Hurricane Center of Beryl. Remains a Category 4 hurricane. It did weaken some. Right now has sustained winds about 145 miles per hour. It peaked out at least as high as 160 miles per hour, maybe 165 miles per hour. So a slight weakening from a Cat 5 to a Cat 4 will barrel right across the southern border, just to the south of the southern border of Jamaica today, pounding away with hurricane conditions as it continues to move on a west-northwest track. This is the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, and it will arrive right over that land area by Friday. And here's that follow-up system that will take a similar path, but it should encounter far less favorable environmental conditions overall, not only with respect to humidity levels, for example, in the middle and upper parts of the atmosphere, but potentially with respect to those sea surface temperatures, which should cool down a little bit following the passage of Beryl, as it causes some upwelling, which brings some colder water up to the surface. So likely not going to reach a tropical storm or hurricane status, but it may be a close call on the tropical storm side of things. Certainly don't see anything like a major hurricane with this particular system that follows Beryl. Same path into the Caribbean Sea, but certainly we'll monitor it over the next several days. Now, here's the official track by the National Hurricane Center. Again, for a few days here, I've been talking about, in my opinion, a late change in the track from west-northwest to northwest over the upcoming weekend, which could allow it to make landfall in the southeastern part of Texas. Indeed, the National Hurricane Center is starting to pick up on that now. It looks like generally west-northwest here over the next day or two, then over the upcoming weekend, more of a jog to the north and west, and it could even end up going into the southeastern part of Texas here. Now, let me clear the deck and point out a couple things. First of all, here is Jamaica right here, and again, hurricane conditions today. Indeed, a major hurricane. It's still Category 4, albeit a little bit weaker than yesterday. It's still a major hurricane. Maybe drops down to a Category 3 later in the day, right south of the southern border of Jamaica, but certainly close enough to do some serious damage with a high storm surge. By Friday, it continues to weaken a little bit over the next couple of days, probably into Cat 2, maybe even Cat 1 status by the time it reaches the Yucatan Peninsula region on Friday. Certainly moving over the land mass of the Yucatan Peninsula will continue the weakening process, and it likely knocks it down to a tropical storm status by the time we get to the early part of the weekend. Now, at that point, it's back out over the open waters, the warm waters of the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche, and it certainly can intensify, perhaps reaching back to hurricane status, Category 1 hurricane status. And again, I think there could be a jog to the north and west at this time, perhaps even potentially into the southeastern part of Texas. Certainly, all residents along the Texas coastline continue to monitor this system closely, and we'll see if indeed it intensifies back into a hurricane over the upcoming weekend. Now let's take a look at last night's conventional run of the GFS zero-Z model run. We're looking here at 500 millibar height anomaly maps here, forecast maps, and again, the pressure field is a key to the path of Hurricane Beryl, and this particular high pressure ridge, which right now is centered over the eastern third of the nation, will tend to shift in this direction over the next couple of days, and that kind of opens a door for more of a northwest movement of Beryl late in the game of the life of Beryl. We're talking about over the upcoming weekend, and perhaps potentially making a landfall into the southeastern part of Texas. Now let's push forward here and watch the slow movement to the east of this upper level ridge, and it's a strong upper level ridge, and certainly having an influence on the direction of Beryl as it moves across the Caribbean Sea and then into the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Here we go now into the day on Thursday, 4th of July holiday. And finally, by the time we get to Friday, you see it's kind of weakening and pulling off to the east here, and therefore losing a little bit of influence. And what was a west-northwest track, I think, becomes a northwest track in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico over the upcoming weekend. It crosses right over the Yucatan Peninsula region. And this particular run of the GFS tends to agree with my thinking here that it pulls up to the north and west and potentially could even make a landfall in the southern part of Texas, southeastern Texas. This is all the way at the end of the upcoming weekend. We're talking late Sunday night. Again, it could enter the Gulf of Mexico as a tropical storm and then re-intensify back into a hurricane, even a hurricane potentially making landfall in the southern part of Texas by the end of the upcoming weekend. Certainly something I have to closely monitor over the next several days. It does weaken moving over the landmass of Yucatan, but once it's out over the open waters of the very warm Gulf of Mexico, it can re-intensify back into hurricane status here. And here we go into the end of the upcoming weekend, and then it slides northward into Texas. And now beyond that, that secondary tropical system could very well play a role in the western Caribbean Sea, and ultimately the Gulf of Mexico will move forward here, and we'll see this more on the surface maps, but there could be another tropical system in this area in several days. Again, not nearly the strength of Hurricane Beryl, which reached Cat 5 status and still remains as a Cat 4 major hurricane. Now, by the time we get to the end of next week, you see high pressure ridging all across the country. This looks like quite a hot spell for much of the nation, especially the southern half of the U.S., where high pressure ridging will dominate the scene. There still will be kind of a jet stream across the far northern part of the U.S., but this looks like a pretty hot pattern by the end of next week. Well, let's wrap up here with the surface forecast maps, again using the 0Z run of the GFS, which I believe has a pretty good handle on the tropical situation here, so that's why I'm using that right now. Still a moderate humidity type of day in the mid-Atlantic region, but that all changes by the 4th of July, Independence Day holiday on Thursday. It becomes hotter, more humid. It stays hot and humid, hot and sticky Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, with a daily chance of showers and thunderstorms in the mid-Atlantic region. Now, let's push forward here. And here we go into the holiday on Thursday. And there'll be a weak front dropping to the south and east, and it'll be enough to kick off the chance of afternoon and evening showers and thunderstorms that may have an impact on fireworks displays, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. Any thunderstorm that does form later tomorrow and tomorrow night, and this goes for Friday and Saturday as well, can produce some locally heavy rainfall, can certainly reach strong to severe status later Thursday, Friday, Saturday in the Mid-Atlantic region. Now here, on the very bottom portion of this image, you can see Hurricane Beryl moving over the Yucatan Peninsula region. Again, later in the day on Friday that takes place. That'll weaken it. No doubt it should weaken into tropical storm status. Well, I shouldn't say no doubt, but likely to drop down to tropical storm status. But then, out over the open waters of the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, notice right here, I'll backtrack a little bit, 991 millibars, then 993, weakens, but then it starts to strengthen again to 986 millibars by Saturday morning once it's out over those open, warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. And now at this particular stage, it's starting to turn more to the north and west. And again, potential landfall in the southern part of Texas. All residents along the southeast Texas coast monitor this system closely right through the upcoming weekend. Let's clear the deck here and move forward. And here we go into the second half of the upcoming weekend. Now down to a 981 millibar tropical system. Perhaps Category 1 hurricane at this particular time, closing out a place like Brownsville, Texas, for example. This is Saturday night, and then finally into Sunday morning further intensification on this particular run of the GFS. Certainly this is on the table that, yes, it weakens to tropical storm status, but then can re-intensify into Cat 1, maybe even Cat 2 status by the time it reaches northeastern Mexico or the southern part of Texas later in the upcoming weekend. And here we go. This particular model run has it in southern Texas as certainly a strong tropical system here by the time we get next Monday morning. Now, let's just quickly move forward here. Again, there can be a reflection of another tropical system on its heels out of the Gulf of Mexico by the earlier middle part of next week. Here we go with what remains Beryl by this time next Tuesday, July 9th. And this is likely that second system that will not reach the same strength as Beryl, but indeed it's something that'll have to be monitored as it crosses the probably somewhat cool the Caribbean Sea out into the Gulf of Mexico by next Tuesday. We'll go all the way out into the middle part of next week, and this is that second tropical system here that way out there 7-day forecast looks like it could have an impact on Texas, much like Beryl can have an impact on Texas, certainly northeastern Mexico as well. So a lot going on with respect to the tropical scene in the Atlantic Basin. Hurricane Beryl remains a major hurricane at this hour, Category 4, and it'll pound away at Jamaica today and then the Yucatan Peninsula on Friday. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.